Finance meeting. Is there any public comment? Hearing none, we'll move on to Jesse McCree, South Central Workforce Investment Board. Welcome, Jesse.
Great, thank you, Commissioner. Thanks for having me here this afternoon. Really, just in the short time that we have this afternoon, I wanted to just cover three basic things. A little bit about sort of the overview of the labor market, of what Cumberland County is working with in terms of the labor dynamics. A little bit about what South Central PA Works does as a workforce development board. And then additionally save some time for some questions and some comments, particularly as it relates to, I know Jonathan's not here, but our work with economic development. So I figured we'd take 4 or 5 minutes just to do a quick overview of our labor market data, a couple minutes just about who we are and what we do, and then take some time for questions, if that's okay. Thanks. Just as a brief overview, so the Workforce Development Board is a 501c3 nonprofit that's made up of, really it's 2 board of directors. One is one county commissioner, a representative from each of the 8 counties that we represent. Perry, Juniata, Cumberland, Dauphin, Lebanon, Adams, Franklin, New York. So we have one county commissioner board of directors, as well as a 23 person board of directors that's made up of at least 50% private sector businesses. So really the goal of what we do is to invest and direct state and federal resources to help build a skilled workforce for this region. So we believe strongly that the work that we do drives the development of both businesses and individuals, the job seekers that we serve in our PA Cumberland sites. A lot of this information, commissioners are probably aware of, but I thought it would be good to provide a little bit of context of what we're doing in the environment that we're operating in. Really in one map, this describes that South Central PA as a region, and Cumberland County specifically, is driving much of the population growth in Pennsylvania. The recent American Community Survey came out, I think last week, and Cumberland County was the fastest growing county by population. But as you can see by this map, the majority of the population growth is happening in the surrounding counties outside of Cumberland as well. Interesting, what I'll probably do for the next map is I'll overlay I-81 and I-78 onto this map. Every county that is bordering I-81 and I-78 is leading the growth for population in Pennsylvania.
Just totally unrelated. Why is Juniata one of the higher? Just because there's like no people there to begin with?
It is a law of small numbers.
Okay.
I think they probably added a few hundred people. That was a significant percentage growth. But to some degree, there is a lot of commuting that's going on in Perry and Juniata into Cumberland, Dauphin, even to some degree, Franklin and Adams as well. So again, as we look at our labor market, this is an area where the population is growing as compared to the rest of Pennsylvania. A little bit hard to see on your screen, but it is in your handout. A lot of the work that we do as a workforce development board is look at key industry clusters. These clusters are, as a sector-based strategy, are ways of looking at similar industries and similar employers that are really providing much of the economic growth in our region. Again, not a lot of surprises here. Health and the healthcare industry is rapidly growing, above 2% annual growth in Cumberland County. We're also seeing construction, professional services, and even to some degree, the transportation, warehousing, distribution sector is probably growing faster than what it even represents on this chart here. I did want to point out as well that manufacturing is sort of clustered in the left-hand quadrant of this. The interesting thing about manufacturing in this region is that while the numbers of people employed in manufacturing are either stagnant or slightly declining, the gross domestic product, if you will, for South Central PA in manufacturing continues to grow pretty substantially. So basic economics says that with more growth in terms of productivity and fewer people, we're becoming more efficient at producing and moving these goods. So really what that speaks to is the increased role of automation, robotics, and the disruptive technologies that are existing in manufacturing today. So that's a big part of what I wanted to touch on today.
Jesse, what does, you sound like a very dumb question, what does health encompass?
Yeah, good question. So it would include any industry that relates to the healthcare sector writ large. So that would be hospitals, nursing care facilities, long-term care facilities, Any of the support occupations such as home health aides would be lumped into that industry as well. It does not include industries that are auxiliary, right? So the data or the security compliance piece would probably be more professional services. So this is really service provision industry.
Thank you.
Good question. So just as a brief summary here, the key sectors in our region, and this is in some cases overlaid on what the key sectors here in Cumberland County are: healthcare growing rapidly, advanced manufacturing, the productivity is increasing, and we need to find ways to harness those disruptive technologies and train our skilled workforce to meet the demands of what businesses need to continue to grow. Of course, logistics and transportation, this is very relevant here for this county. Millions of square feet of warehousing built on spec in some cases and being sold maybe even years before occupancy happens. This, where we sit right now, we're within 50% of the country's population within an 8-hour drive. Construction is growing. The latest jobs report, which will come out on Friday, will show a pretty significant increase in payrolls for construction. And IT, not a lot of folks think of South Central PA as a tech corridor, but increasingly what we're seeing across the country is that communities are either becoming tech centers or they are declining rapidly. So it's imperative for us to upskill our current workforce for the jobs that are needed in this space, including coding, development, and cybersecurity. Those jobs aren't going anywhere, so we need to be aware of that industry's growth. Again, a little hard to see it here, but I think in your packet it'll be a little bit more clear. These are the key occupational gaps projected over the next 10 years for Cumberland County. So we take a look at this graph and we look at where is our investments, where are our funds going to best go to train and upskill the workforce for the jobs that will be here for the next 10 years. As you can see, healthcare practitioners, healthcare support occupations, there's a very significant projected occupational gap. That would include, I might say, the replacement demand as well as the growth demand. So that would be all of the baby boomers that will be transitioning out of the workforce, in addition to companies moving here to basically create jobs. There is a significant projected gap with those occupations. You'll see other key ones: construction, computer and mathematical occupations. That would include some of those IT jobs that we're looking at as well. So when we look at a targeted investment strategy for the work that we do, we're looking at key sectors and key occupations such as these. As I just said, nursing, healthcare, support occupations, industrial mechanics, truck drivers. If you go up and down 81 or 83, you'll see these signs for drivers wanted. You'll see them on the back of tractor trailer trucks. They are some of the most in-demand jobs in our region for sure. So that gives you a little bit of framework for the labor market that we're working with right now. This is also a really interesting graph here. This is the education and training that's required and the percentage of employment based on that training level. So if you look over here, the green and it was yellow when I printed it out, but it's sort of an off yellow. It's the short-term on-the-job training and the moderate-term on-the-job training right over here. You combine those two, and it's about 54% of the total occupations, so the total employment in Cumberland County, are jobs that do not require a 4-year degree, but require more than a high school diploma. So when you think about the targeted occupations that we as a workforce board are most focused on, it's really these right over here. Can we provide training resources, career awareness, and job placement services for those jobs that maybe need 6 months classroom training or on-the-job training? So these are sometimes called middle skill jobs. And while I don't love that term, it does sort of represent there's a need for these jobs that used to be probably called blue collar, but increasingly are needing a variety of key technical support and training in order to grow.
Justin, before we
Yes.
move on, I just want to go back to this graph. You have healthcare practitioners and technical occupations lumped together.
That is, yeah.
All right, so I wanted to ask you about, what do you include in technical occupations?
So the vast majority, Commissioner, in that would be registered nurses. Registered nurses would be a big part of that, practitioners and technical occupations. It would also include LPNs, licensed practical nurses. In some
But
cases,
it's all healthcare related in that top position of the top?
correct.
Okay, what about where are, maybe over here, like welders and other trades? Where are they located?
Yeah, that's a good question. So that will be in, yeah, there's going to be some construction and extraction occupations. That will be general labor, which would be where a lot of the welders, electricians will be, some of the skilled trades will be in there. To some degree, there may even be an installation, maintenance, and repair occupations. Think of industrial maintenance mechanics would be in there as well.
Okay, all right. So, but pretty much that top line, that is pretty much healthcare related, so.
It is, yes. And, you know, some of the other, a little bit less common occupations would be some of the technicians, you know, a radiologist tech, where it doesn't necessarily need a 4-year degree, but the 2-year associate's degree would be included in there as well.
Okay, all right, thank you. So,
Jesse, on that
Yes.
same graph, it's very interesting. So I'm reading this correctly, the bottom piece where the bars are going to the left, is there will be plenty of some supply there for the jobs, they're not in high demand.
Correct.
Okay, so is it safe to say on the top end, the healthcare, technical healthcare support, construction and extraction, computer and mathematical occupations, pretty much after those 4 categories, we see somewhat of a drop.
Correct.
Okay.
In a, just to go theory for a second, in a perfect labor market, you would have 0 unemployment because you could take every person that was laid off from one job and, you know, easily and efficiently train them for another job that's open. But as you said, Commissioner, down here when you see the occupations that are skewed to the left, production occupations, there's likely going to be, we have a surplus. The key piece would be, can we train them for other in-demand jobs in our region?
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
This is very helpful for the simple reason that we constantly hear about how Cumberland County has one of the lowest unemployment rates. And the conclusion a lot of people draw from that is we're in balance, everything's solved, we don't have to worry about this, the economy takes care of itself, or that's somebody else's problem. This is really what's behind the curtain when you talk about that unemployment rate. So I'm glad you put this in here. It's very, very enlightening.
Yeah, it's an interesting point about Cumberland County's unemployment rate as well. I think, you know, we're operating historically under relatively low unemployment rates, but I think the key piece is, as you said, there is still imbalances that we need to be aware of and be targeted in training for those occupations that will be here in 1 to 2 to 5 years. In addition, if you look at this, there's, you know, this gap up here. Think of it as a company, a healthcare company that would move to Cumberland County, but because of the 82-person shortage, it's, you know, that's a large healthcare company that says we can't move here because there's not the skilled workforce.
You said one thing that really stuck out, and I want to underscore it. You said the jobs that are going to be here as well. So this is not just a snapshot in time of this is where it is today. We're in a very dynamic economy right now, and jobs are changing, industries are changing enormously. So it's very important we take that forward-looking approach. And again, this is exceedingly helpful.
Yeah. All right. Thank you.
Jesse, one more question. Can we go back to that pie chart? Okay, does that say today, for all the employment in Cumberland County, those employed, this is a breakdown of their educational background as of today?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I just want to explore that chart just a little bit more.
That's an interesting chart.
So it looks about half of that pie chart. Folks need on-the-job training. Okay, so I'm going to ask you a question here, you don't have to answer it. You know, does that mean our education system essentially is failing our populace? I mean, you've got 50% of the people there, you're saying that they're not getting it at the 2-year certificate, they're not getting it at bachelor's or postgraduate degrees. I mean, essentially what you seem to be suggesting there for the jobs that are available, folks need to have on-the-job training. But my question is, could they be receiving like technical education, career education, essentially in our educational system?
That's a big question and a good one. I would, in one word, I would say apprenticeships are a good example, where you would need a very strong K-12 system in order to prepare that individual for the workplace competencies, how to work, the value of work, some basic education, math, reading. But an apprenticeship would be an example of, you don't need a postgrad degree, you don't need a bachelor's, you probably don't even need a 2-year degree, you need key on-the-job training that's demand-driven. So I think the answer is, we certainly need clearly a strong education system, a K-12 system, to prepare those individuals to go into the workforce, regardless of where they end up here. But the other thing I'd say is 4-year college is not for everyone. And that's a big mantra that we know very well in our work.
We've been talking about that since, and I've mentioned this to my colleagues, and actually Commissioner DiFilippo brought up the same subject at our State of the County breakfast the other day. But we've been talking about this for the past 25 or 30 years. I remember this was, essentially an issue that was discussed under the administration of former Governor Robert Casey. So my question is, and I do think that some of our school districts are beginning to get it. I'm particularly impressed by Dr. Fred Witham of the Cumberland Valley School District, who's doing some really good things, and again, an understanding of the job market that's out there, how much debt young people are racking up, for some of these, college degrees. I mean, liberal arts is really not the way to go anymore, unless you rack up a lot of debt.
And it's
I mean, I hate to make these judgments calls because, hey, college is still a goal for many and can lead to, advancement in their careers. But like you said, it's not for everybody. And I think we've been focused, Mr. DiFilippo made this point, we've been focused for too long on pushing kids to college. And, there needs to be a better counseling system at the school district level, I believe.
One of the grants, we just 2 weeks ago received a grant. It wasn't a lot of money, but it's about $150,000 to invest in our 8-county region to bring businesses into schools for the purpose of career awareness and building programs to go on job tours, to have build internships, to basically bring a greater awareness for young students, think late middle school, early high school, for the potential jobs that are out there that in some cases need a 4-year degree, but not in all cases. In fact, 54% of them will probably not need a 4-year degree. Educating the parents too is another really critical aspect of that, because I know for me, college was 13th grade. It was just expected to go without even consideration that there may be some viable opportunities outside of that. So. Great. I want to be aware of time here, so I'll keep
12 minutes or so.
12 minutes. Okay, I'll wrap this up here in about a couple minutes. So here's just a quick snapshot of some of the work that we do. So we've talked a little bit about the labor market and some of the dynamics. South Central PA Works invests about $12 million in our region each year, and the vast majority of that is through federal and state grants. As a side note, it's one of my core goals is to be able to diversify our funding sources a little bit more so that we can have more flexible funds to invest in the programs that we want to. But where we're at right now is about $12 million in our community. And really what we do is we manage and run 6 PA CareerLink sites throughout the region. There is one in Carlisle, just right up the road. The foot traffic at our sites throughout all 6 regions, or 6 sites throughout our region, is about 115,000. Just to give you a snapshot of some of the impact that we're making in our region. Last year alone, we placed 545 unemployed adults into work. to give you a ballpark of the annual salaries that they received in their new work is about 17.3 million. So it's a pretty good return on investment in terms of resume help, job placement assistance, even on the job or in classroom training to be able to upskill them for the work that they need to do. In terms of youth programs, last year we served almost 1,000 young adults. The goals for those programs would be anything from full-time employment to summer employment, placement, and education and training programs. In addition, because we're working in an environment of, what is the unemployment rate here, 3.6% or something like that, there are many cases those with significant barriers to employment that are not working. So we're tasked with upskilling, training, and doing job placement for even some of our earned participants, those on welfare or income assistance. And really the focus is not just employment, but also credentials that they need to compete in the labor market. Here's a brief list of sort of 5 things that we're doing right now. A lot of what we're doing, and we can sort of have an offline conversation with Jonathan as well, is work with our economic development agencies, because as you well know, the workforce question is one of the, if not the top question for businesses looking to relocate in Cumberland County or to expand. Do we have the skilled workforce that we need to continue to grow? So a lot of the work that we're doing is really trying to integrate our outreach to businesses in tandem with economic development. So company ABC, instead of getting 5 or 6 phone calls from our staff and from an EDC, we're really trying to integrate that program into one cohesive unit. I mentioned apprenticeship programs that we're building with private industry and education. In addition, and this is sort of a 101 workforce thing, but we're just really starting to do it here in this region, is really make this a demand-driven system. So get employer-led sector partnerships to tell us, hey, Jesse, this is where you need to be investing in programs and services. So instead of us coming up with a good idea and developing a nice training program, we're hearing from businesses about what they need to grow. So these sector partnerships are, we've got one for healthcare, we've got a great one for advanced manufacturing, and we're looking to expand in some other key sectors as well. Ex-offenders, those with significant barriers to employment. A lot of the work that we do is we bring in grants specific for a population or demographic to serve. We pilot it, we find out what works, we test it, we evaluate it, we go back to the drawing board if it doesn't work, and we redeploy resources in the best way. There's a great program that I can talk to you more about at a later time. Basically, it's in Dauphin County, but it's a transitional jobs program. Those individuals leaving a state corrections facility, within 5 days of leaving the site, they're back at home and they're employed at one of our transitional jobs programs, where they're on the payroll of our provider and they're doing maintenance, janitorial work, and they're getting a paycheck every single day as sort of an incentive to continue to stay in the workforce. That program goes for about 3 or 4 months until we place them into unsubsidized employment. We found some great success in serving some of the hardest to serve there. And then finally, we're launching a Careers in 2 Years campaign, which is essentially a marketing awareness campaign for, Commissioner, what you just mentioned before about the educating the students and the parents, that 4-year degrees, while they're good for some, are not necessarily the only option. So some of the key questions that we talked about here that we're working on, but that's just a quick overview of labor market, what we're doing, and how we're looking to continue to invest in this community. Certainly happy to take any questions, or I think my card is in there as well. If you have any questions, you can certainly reach out to me as well.
Any questions?
I appreciate you coming in, Jesse. I know that I think you were scheduled to meet with us on a couple other occasions.
Yeah.
This is an important discussion, and it's something, I know that our Economic Development Corporation, Jonathan's here, he knows, and this is a priority. Workforce development is a priority, I think, for KDIC. It needs to be a collaborative effort, in my opinion. I mean, I think there needs to be a greater emphasis, at our school districts, and early on, not wait until they're 10th grade. But I think there needs to be an effort, to talk about success. Doesn't always mean going to college. In fact, there's a lot of people who graduated from college, they're still looking for work. While folks who didn't go to college are making more than some who come out of college. So, and I go back to, this is really not new, and that's why I was kind of bringing up the issue with the governor, the late Governor Robert B. Casey. I mean, we've been talking about this for an awful long time. But I think there's like this sense that gets taught or developed that if you go to college, you know, as soon as you come out of college, you're going to get some job, you know, earning, you know, 70, 75,000, whatever. And there's a stark reality when they get out of college that they don't start out at the top. Okay? I mean, that nobody just starts at the top. You know, you got to prove yourself, work your way up. But anyway, thank you very much.
Thank you, Commissioner, appreciate it.
Good information. That pie chart just shocked me a little bit.
Yeah.
But
That's reality.
Before we leave this topic, John, since you were the special member to be here and you identified this as a top issue here in Cumberland County, especially as we discussed earlier with the low unemployment rate. So did you have any observations you want to share with us in regards to?
No, I think we work very closely with Jesse's office, and so we have a lot of the information that he shared today, and that's the information we've been looking at for quite some time. We just recently held our first workforce development committee meeting, which I know Jesse's a member of, along with some other employers in Cumberland Valley School District and some other educators at the table. I think to Jesse's point, I think where we're headed as a group is really focusing on kind of the advanced healthcare, the nursing, which is in those top two bars with looking at how you integrate technology with healthcare and the needs that will come as a result of that. And then the advanced manufacturing is big. I mean, one of our focus areas is food processing and agribusiness, and a lot of those skills translate over to food processing jobs in addition to advanced manufacturing jobs. And so the committee is at its infancy level, but I think it's really going to target and focus on those two areas. And with the merger of Pinnacle and UPMC potentially coming into play, that could be a real game changer here in Cumberland County for us. And then also with Geisinger being here and some of their potential growth plans. And so I think there's some opportunities for us in those, specifically in those two industries and some of those key occupations.
thank you. All right.
Great.
Thank
you.
you.
Sure. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Take care. Good job.
See you. Thank you. Okay, next is building engineering study for CNRC. John, Bob, Dana, whoever wants to start off here.
If you move one on. This is the FSCPS study, and we've as you know, we hired two firms, UDOT Engineering and Cumberland Engineering firm. These are two and I believe they were very good choices by the county. And both reports were completed and by the firms and submitted. For review. After this meeting and questions are answered, if there are any, we'll proceed with the action plan that needs to be submitted by April 14th. The two studies are very similar in nature, with just a couple of aspects that may be up to question. But I can open up for questions, or however you want me to proceed. Just if you want me to continue, I can continue, or you can begin to ask each firm questions. Josh Pally is here on the left. He's from Cofell Engineering, and James Munger is on the right from QDOT Engineering. And we have both the reports. And Cofell has also sent me a report, which is not needed for this meeting, but also they did a finding, a life life safety findings for us, which is very, very beneficial. So without further ado, any questions?
John, you can put together a chart for us regarding what the issues are with each company, what their comments, recommendations were. They seem to be fairly similar. I think that I see maybe a couple of differences.
There are a couple differences. On the FSC deficiency 1, that's the building type 000. And after talking to both of the engineers and inspectors, they feel the building can be brought up to the correct rating, but there will be some cost involved depending on the options we choose. Both have agreed. If I misspeak, please tell me,
Yeah,
because your reports were very expensive. But both have agreed that the I-beams are sprayed, and they're fine in most cases, but the floor web trussings that's set on the concrete columns have not been sprayed. And there's two choices there. Either you spray everything and complete the columns and, or the floor joists, I should say, or you replace the ceiling panels with a proper Armstrong fire-rated ceiling panel with the proper weight to it to eliminate the clips that were needed, which are almost next to impossible to install the clips. So that's the one decision. The one thing we did find with Cofeld's report is they said the fourth floor may not need ceiling panels replaced because it seems to be all concrete. But I believe there was, I talked to you and I believe you had further information on that.
What I would clarify to that was, we didn't physically see the exposed bar joists that we saw on the lower floors on floor 4. All the structure members that we saw that were exposed were sprayed on the 4th floor. So just to clarify, I'm not saying there isn't any, but it appeared that there would be less remediation work that would be required on the floor compared to the 4th floor.
The other thing that's a benefit to our building is it's completely sprinklered, which does help with the study. And with both reports, I believe that it was an excellent decision to go with both reports, because if CMS or Life Safety disagreed with one of the reports, said we disagree with the findings, we have both reports to back up what we're saying and our plan of action. The spray on fireproofing, where it is coming off, that definitely needs patched and placed back. The option to spray the whole thing is probably the most costly, which I would not recommend, because all the ceiling panels have to be removed anyways, and you have to wrap all those beams with some type of mesh, a couple different types of mesh, maybe chicken wire or whatever, to get it to adhere to the beams. So the best solution we have right now is to replace the ceiling panels. The ceiling panels were all fire rated at one time, but back in the 90s or sometime back in that, before our time, somebody started replacing them with non-fire rated material. The other question that I had, and I had discussed with Cofeld, was the grid, the ceiling grid.
John, can
Yeah.
before you just move on from that. So some of the ceiling tiles are with mass, but some won't, is that what you're
The
saying?
second floor ceiling tiles,
Yeah.
some of them are still fire rated, but somebody, I don't know if they got a good deal on ceiling panels, federal surplus or something, that's what I am thinking happened. And they decided, hey, let's replace all the ceiling panels and upgrade.
Okay, but the ones that essentially are fire rated, we would not have to replace, is that what you're saying?
Well, the ones that are fire rated now, I don't know if they have the proper weight.
Yeah, that part of the problem is you would literally have to go and look at every one of the panels to see whether or not it's acceptable. And by that time, you might as well replace them. You gotta replace them anyway, you know, some of them are water damaged, et cetera. So, you know, by the time that just seemed more logical to just go ahead and replace them and be done with it. Thankfully, when they replaced them, they didn't mess around with whatever grid they replaced. Thank goodness they replaced it with the right grid. And the tile wires appear to be good, so it's just a tile issue. And originally, the steel bar joists weren't sprayed. It's not that it was knocked off. The original design didn't call for them to be sprayed. We relied upon the ceiling as part of the until we walked in the room a while ago, we haven't had any exchange of information. In our research, we actually found an evaluation report done by the International Code Council that has an assembly that does not require any of the steel to be sprayed. So that could be a consideration, that rather than patching what's been damaged, that we treat it as that other assembly that doesn't require anything to be sprayed significantly and go that route. Of course, all the tiles come out, you're gonna be able to see everything much better than poking your head up in a tile or two. And what's damaged, while that material is typically in new construction sprayed on, in patching you can do it with a trowel because it's just small areas. And that's one of the other reasons why, you mentioned the expense, but to wrap and spray all those bar joists, not only do you have expense of that on the ceiling, but you're going to shut each one of those floors down to do that.
The other assembly you were talking about, what do you mean, you have another assembly which doesn't require patching of the?
Yeah, there was one that we found that's a newer assembly. It's referenced in our report. You may have the same one. Yeah, we found out on the evaluation service. But yeah, I don't think. Yes, that's the same one. Yep. So there are some other options there, but yeah, that's possible. That just fix the tiles and whatever, you may not have to patch.
So
damage insulation.
May I ask a question? So if we don't patch and CMS came back and said, oh yes, you have to patch, would we be in a defensible position if we used what code or whatever you're just referencing?
In my opinion, you would, yes. Because there's more options now than what was originally done.
Okay.
Yeah.
I partially agree with what he has to say. What I can say is, because we didn't review every little element of this system, which involves not only the tiles, the clips, the dampers, I don't think I could say 100% for sure that what we have in place would meet this. Further study might conclude that it may, but I'm of the opinion that if the route is taken to remove the tiles and expose the bare steel I-beams, that if they're already exposed, let's return that to how that was originally designed, to leave out any question, as well as remediate the tiles. So then there wouldn't be any question. And like you said, it's more of a seamless job to patch small areas versus a whole floor.
Thank you.
Yeah, it might actually, just following up that, be more cost effective just to patch a few places rather than having it all ripped out, then having to have us come in and look while all the ceilings are down to see what's there and reevaluate it and pay for another study when, hey, let's just get somebody to patch it and be done with it and move on.
We have what appears to be 3 deficiencies. The one we're talking about now is fireproofing. In that, I see something mentioned about HVAC dampers and light fixture tinting. How does this all come into play?
That's actually part of the ceiling assembly.
Okay.
So when they replace the tiles, basically what it comes down to is using the ceiling tile material to create a box, or what the code refers to as a tent, over top of that light fixture. It provides part of the thermal barrier to protect the steel.
Is it a fire rating?
Okay, that is an interesting question, because did you say, Josh, that we could use the existing cap and brackets without boxing the hole? Any light that protrudes above the ceiling needed to be boxed in.
The assembly that I think we're both on the same page at, and based on what we saw, is it wasn't fully boxed, like a 5-sided box. It was really, you had spacers on top of these fixtures above the ceiling, and then you had a tile that was the same footprint as that particular light fixture. And that is also what this assembly, well, I think we're on the same
I
page
think
with,
so, yeah.
refers to. So it's not a complete box.
And the damper shouldn't be an issue because they are inspected every 6 years, they're tested, and they're also, we do PMs on the dampers and stuff, so that shouldn't be a really big problem.
Yeah, the only reason we mentioned our report was just to make sure that when the work was done to replace the ceiling, that those existing dampers got put back. That somebody didn't take them out and go, oh, we don't need this anymore, that you put them back, like they already exist.
Okay, just so I understand this, like fixture tenting matter, it seems like there's a little bit of a difference of opinion on this, is it, or maybe you can explain the difference of opinion. I think QDOT is suggesting that they need to be completely boxed in and enclosed. And then I'm reading Koppel saying any light that is not surface mounted protrudes into the air above ceiling is compliant using existing light fixture top panel along with brackets. So can you explain?
We based our, yes, sir, we based our report on that one assembly that the International Code Congress Evaluation Service used, which didn't require the steel to be protected, and it requires that, as part of that specifications requires that box.
Mm-hmm.
So there are different ways to do this. I mean, there's a lot of different assemblies, so, you know, if you go out to bid and all that, you know, you kind of write it in a performance approach, and somebody could come up with that proposal and be evaluated. You could use two different assemblies and be able to accomplish the same thing. The one with fire-rated assemblies is that it's very specific parts put together in a very specific fashion. It's not just like, oh, I think I'll use a little of this and a little of that. And having been a public official, I know when I put in my report that you had to use those Armstrong tiles, I knew that somebody probably was going to read, wait a minute, I can't specify I use somebody's product. But when you get to fire-rated assemblies, they call for specific products by specific manufacturers. And that's the reason that you find that in our reports, when we call out a specific material by a specific manufacturer, is that's what's required to get the assembly.
And though my assembly sounds like very slightly, I concur with, you know, what he's saying. And in the back of my Koppel's presentation, we have basically attached that assembly, and it goes into every detail about every component and what's required. And it does, as he said, list Armstrong, for instance, as the manufacturer for the tiles that it requires. So the main difference between what is in this assembly and what I think we would like to propose is that basically upping the density or getting more substantial tiles than what's specified here, for the reason being you wouldn't have to put on those cumbersome hold down clips, which become a practical nightmare for a facility every time they want to go above the ceiling or service something, move a duct, you know, hang something, what have you. It's not very practical to have them, so if they can avoid that, that's what was our recommendation.
That's the same thing we put in ours, is that the tiles have that specific weight, is for that reason.
There is, you want to move to deficiency 2, travel distances can't exceed 200 feet. Appears that's not an issue.
That doesn't appear to be an issue. The report.
Yeah, we actually measured the travel distances, and well, one of the things that we found interesting was that the report is, and I think he and I agree with this, misstated what the code required. And the report talks about you can't exceed 200 feet from smoke barrier to smoke barrier, when in fact what the report and what the code says and what's in our report is what's required is you can't be at any point in the smoke compartment, you can't be more than 200 feet away from the smoke barrier. So in generality, you can say smoke barrier walls could almost be 400 feet apart, give or take. So for some reason that is misstated, and I think we both looked at older reports, and that deviations seem to have been created many years ago, and it just got rolled in from one report to another report to another report, and Lord knows when those distances were actually measured and who measured them.
From a, I guess, still on the travel distance, smoke area concern. Part of the problem I think we came across when trying to determine that was we didn't have a good set of plans which really said,
Yeah.
this is where our smoke barriers are. So part of our study was identifying where they were and then making the measurements based on that. So that could have been a hiccup in the past of why the measurement wasn't done properly. But in all accounts, there's minimal, if not anything, that really needs to be done once we've now determined where the location of these barriers is.
Yeah, actually in the tower building, there were smoke barrier walls on all 4 floors that the health department didn't recognize, didn't show in the reports. Now, on the other side of it, as you look at that, I guess, in a way to go with this, the smoke barrier travel distance issues, is that if the FSESs continue to be used, just merely correcting the construction issue, I think, bumps the score up good enough to even compensate if there were still problems. If there, that's what they indicated in their report.
And I think I have a slightly,
We wanted to get, I think both of us, let's get, and when we did the survey with all that, let's figure out a way to make them all go away. So we don't have to do an FSES at all.
exactly, and I think I have a slightly different, or I interpreted the old report slightly differently in that I did agree that the wording was incorrect, but I interpreted it as there was an issue in a different area of the building, not necessarily the F wing. They referenced zone 1 and zone 2, and on that in and of itself was difficult. So we looked back and found drawings that indicated these zones where they were, and to try to make sense of where they're actually located. And based on that, one of the zones I did identify as being fairly oversized per what was included in the existing documentation, but as part of the survey, I posed solutions to the facility on how they could shrink it based on the existing condition of the existing barriers they have, as long as they maintain them and show them on their plans, it would remedy the problem as well. So the key, I think, came out of it was the facility got a good set of plans now of where their smoke barriers are, where the fire barriers are, where their exits are, because it's key with a nursing home and healthcare environment that horizontal evacuation is what you want to do. Move people to other smoke zones and evacuate the building as a last resort. So knowing where the smoke barriers are is eminently important. Hence the travel distance limitations.
The third FSES deficiency noted is extended smoke zones. And Josh, correct me if I'm wrong, you're indicating that does not appear to be an issue. And Jim, you're saying a little something else.
No, I think that what we found with the additional smoke barrier walls that the state didn't recognize, that the distance from smoke barrier to smoke barrier and the size of the compartments, it isn't an issue anymore. And again, that may have been a drawing problem with what they could look at, but once we found those additional smoke barrier walls, everything pretty much reconciled.
Josh, in your report, you had replacing the panels and the doors for the smoke zones?
20-minute.
I think we're still, I think there might have been a little bit of a hiccup between the two. There's a 200-foot travel distance requirement to an exit, which is exterior door or stair, and there's an independent requirement for a 200-foot travel distance to a smoke barrier door. We did not have any issues with 200-foot travel distance to exits. We didn't have any discrepancies between our reports, my understanding. The discrepancy, I think, that came down to with the distance to the smoke barrier doors for the horizontal egress, as I previously mentioned, was not in the F wing, not in our subject building that we were talking about, the construction issue, but in the centrally located connector portion of the building that really is houses, you know, the dining, the kitchen, the back house space, the boiler rooms. Because we didn't have, from what we could tell, there wasn't any recognized smoke barriers in that area. That smoke compartment as a whole was, we measured about 30 to 31,000 square feet. Typical smoke compartments are limited to 22,500 square feet. So with the oversized zone led to a travel distance to the smoke barrier, which is the boundary of the smoke zone issue. Wasn't that bad of an issue, but 200 feet is 200 feet. We measured, I think, at about 215. So as part of the solution that you were referencing was to try to do minimal, reusing the existing barriers that are in place that were not classified as smoke barriers, but as a piece of that to remediate that 200-foot distance, it required us to use or suggest that you all use an existing set of control doors that's between the kitchen and the behavioral health heritage harbor area, which those doors currently, there's no, there was an issue with the ceiling, the vision panels in them, because for a true smoke barrier, we need to have either existing wired glass panels, but since we would need to replace them, they would have to be at least 20-minute rated vision panels. The doors themselves are fine, they're solid core, they're 1 3/4 at least. There may be an issue with a gap between the actual and clearances, but for all intents and purposes, it's a minimal amount of work to reclassify that as a smoke barrier.
Okay, I had your comments backwards on that. So, do we have any idea what the cost would be to make these fixes?
I don't know the cost because I don't know the number of panels yet.
Yeah, that's
And,
thought I'd ask.
I believe Josh was working on something, but I don't know if he's got that ready yet.
And unfortunately, I do not. I know that I spoke with Brad in the field. He gave me the indication that he spoke with an individual at Armstrong. So he may have a ballpark, if that's the route you all choose to go. I do agree that that's going to be the least expensive route of the two. I actually reached out to a fireproofing contractor to try to get an idea of the cost. Fortunately, he hasn't got back to me yet, so I can't give you cost. But I think it's safe to say that that's going to be the more expensive of the two solutions.
The heavier weight not using clips. The heavier weight ceiling tiles with no clips.
Correct.
Thank
It's
you.
going to be the lesser.
Yeah, that would be the least
That would be
costly.
the least costly and the least interruptive to building operations. You'd have to just relocate a few folks maybe for a couple hours.
That would be a consideration for us.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that we can do.
yeah.
A couple hours, we can do it, but days at a time, that would be burdensome.
John, anything else you wanted to bring up?
No, we just have to, I believe Bob's gonna work on a submission letter, and we're gonna get that out in time, and then we're going to work, in that letter includes the action plan. And, I may change some of the dates to give us a little bit more time, because this is something that's gonna have to be bid. It's way too time consuming to try and get county staff to do it. So, and also, moving the residents from place to place is an important concern too.
What time frame are we talking about here? I think, weren't we talking originally, remediation over a 5-year period?
Yes, the 5-year period though, I think, we don't, nobody
Yeah.
really knows what the 5-year, when it started.
Yeah, there seems to be,
State
between the feds and the state, they can't seem to latch on everybody to a firm date.
So the date that Brad and I talked about as an unofficial, just here's a date, we used February 28th. From February 28th, now 5 years out, is when the state exited and sent us, and we responded to their plan of correction. So that is our plan of correction date for life safety, is February 28th. So just out of the blue, I just said 5 years from this date going forward.
This February 28th this year.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Gentlemen, I want to just ask you a general question. You don't need to reply. It's up to you. Well, first of all, how many other nursing homes are in the same situation as Claremont that you're aware of? Existing nursing homes in terms of this new rule that came down from Washington, I guess.
Well, yeah, I can tell you that I just did another one in York County just last month. It had the same construction. I mean, it had a construction type issue. I mean, how to correct it was different, but, and again, it was all tied to the changes in the FSES, and they've been operating in that for many, many years.
And I can say,
So,
I have experience with probably a half dozen in the state of Maryland that I have not surveyed since this adoption. I surveyed prior to that adoption. Knowing the adoption was forthcoming, I sent them a letter and said, you know, this is imminent. This is going to be a concern. This may be a concern in the future. It was nothing. They were typically wood frame buildings. It used to be residences. They got converted, and they had passed the FSCSs in the past because of the scoring. Now the scoring survived, more stringent. So, yes, this is probably going to become a big issue.
and I think with this one and like the one in York, this wasn't a matter of whether it was built correctly to begin with. It's what happened to the building over the years.
Right.
And the FSES in the earlier years was a more cost-effective way to make the problem go away. And now that the scoring has changed, you just don't have that option.
The waivers, I think, that were given out in years past are now gone. And there will be no, as I understand, there will be no grandfathering of anybody for anything, for any reason. You're either going to pass 2012 or you're out. And I mean, you correct me if I'm wrong, but that's the understanding I got from the life safety inspectors. It's either going to do it or you're out.
But our home is essentially, fully compliant with the firewalls that are necessary and so forth, right?
As far as we can tell, yes.
And, it's fully sprinklered. Right? So here's the question you don't need to answer. To what extent, when we get through with all this and make these improvements, will it actually improve safety for the residents of Claremont?
That's difficult to quantify.
You know, that's the answer.
I know. Well, and this is where I'm coming from. What is there to say that we make all these improvements and 5 years from now they come back and say, well, you got to make these additional improvements? Is there any way to know what what's in the offing? I mean, the fact of the matter is that you could build a brand new facility tomorrow that's compliant with today's regulations that could be outdated in 5, 10, 15 years, whatever. But what bothers me is I don't quite understand, especially since again the building is completely sprinklered. As far as I can tell, we've met most of the requirements. And so why this is not grandfathered in, I don't understand. But it's kind of like it says to all of our older nursing homes, throughout the state of Pennsylvania. Well, we're going to make you spend a bunch of money. At the same time, the state and other entities are trying to assist us to maintain the financial viability of the nursing home. It raises a huge question in my mind as to why, we're all in favor of making sure that we don't have fires, that we don't endanger our residents. But this kind of, like, the way this has been, essentially brought up is like, oh my God, we've got a fire problem with the nursing home. And I don't want people to feel that way, because we don't, in my opinion. This is just a new rule and another regulation, kind of like I get the impression that we just have to jump through every time that somebody, either the state or the federal government, says jump.
What changed, and Josh, if I dispute with this, let me know. With that fire safety evaluation system, it's basically a score sheet. If you don't meet the prescriptive requirements, whatever they might be, this was the alternative. And you went through the building and you got credit for what you had. And if you had something more than what was required, you got extra credit for that. And when you missed something, when you were deficient, you know, maybe you were overbuilt in this area, then you could make up for it, you know, one of the deficiencies. The problem is with the later addition to the code, they essentially changed some of the values of what things were worth. And I'm sure Josh might get into a philosophical argument about what those values are valid. You know, it's basically a group of folks in a room that decide this is worth 2 points, this is worth 10 points, you know, and that's what changed. You know, unfortunately, the feds adopted the newer edition of the code with the newer scoring system, and things that were acceptable in the past aren't anymore.
And the key value that has changed was the credit or lack thereof that you now get to be fully sprinkler protected.
Yep.
Because everything's now supposed to be fully sprinkler protected, or they're mandated in, what was it, 2008?
Yep.
Every nursing home, long-term
Yep.
care had to be. So that's not extra credit anymore because everyone had it baseline. So that is the crux of why the scoring has changed, and that's the main difference.
If I can, to your point, Commissioner, and I'm going out on a limb, nationally, let's look at this on a bigger scale. Nationally, I think you're talking thousands and thousands of nursing homes across the country. You correct me if I'm wrong, are going to be affected by this. And dollars, not only multiplied by 6 and by 1 or 2, in my estimation, it's going to be thousands nationwide are going to be in the same boat. Would you agree?
Couldn't disagree with that. And in a way, it went through the same thing back in 2008 or whatever when the sprinkler requirement came in. There were a lot of hospitals and nursing homes that had to bite that bullet to stay in business.
This is just so I'm clear, this is a uniform standard that applies whether you're a public facility or.
That is correct.
Okay.
Yes, it's the document adopted by the feds, which is then handed down to the states to enforce.
And if I recall correctly, the people that put these regulations together are they appointed? Are they elected? Who are they?
Well, the Life Safety Code is developed through the National Fire Protection Association, which has what they call a technical committee. And there's a number, because that's one of the largest documents, there's a number of subcommittees on that one. Those committee members are unpaid individuals who have some expertise or experience or knowledge in particular areas. If we're dealing with healthcare, if you look at that committee, you find a lot of healthcare folks on there, but you'll find folks like Josh and myself that are from the fire protection side. You'll find public fire folks on those committees. They all serve as unpaid. They develop those. It's all an open consensus process. Everybody that would want to make a comment has got a way to do that until it's voted on by the membership. Then they publish those documents, and then the feds decide to adopt it. So they have to go through all their rulemaking procedures, and again, it goes through a public comment stage at the federal level.
Well, I appreciate that. It's one of the things I intend to ask our congressman the next time I speak with him relative to some of these regulations. And again, undoubtedly well-meaning, but you know, this is an issue that we have constantly on everything we do. It's where's the money coming from? Where's the money coming?
And in years past, I'm sorry.
No, that's all right.
No, in years past, I think another significant point, and again, I think it's going down the road, Commissioner, that you're going down. In years past, oversight of this was with the states. Oversight now is with CMS. It's with the federal government. They're going to be the final.
Yeah.
They're going to be the final judge of this, to whether you pass, you don't pass, what you got to do, don't do. So there might have been a little more leeway years past with state. It's a different ballgame now that it's in the hands of the federal government.
Well, it'll be interesting to see, again, as to whether this is being applied fairly across the state and the nation, number one. Number two, as to, considering the fact that the fastest growing segment of our population is 85 years and older, and we have all of us baby boomers coming right along here. You know, I don't believe that there's going to be a reduced need for nursing, for skilled nursing homes. We may not have to build too many more, but I don't think there's going to be a need for a reduction in the number of beds. So it'll be interesting to see how the needs of our seniors, you know, get met with these increased regulatory requirements. And whether that leaves some of our seniors out in the cold, quite frankly.
Thank you, Jim.
Back to something Commissioner Roach mentioned earlier. So, you know, in your professional opinion, is there any option hypothetically for future-proofing ourselves, even if that involves a higher expense? Or is that just too much of a gamble?
Well, I think if you, I mean, obviously, the rules can always change, and there's no way that we can predict all of those things. But if you look at where you're at, and with this philosophy of let's just not fix the construction type, which would give us enough to get over the smoke barrier issues on the score, let's fix everything, so therefore we're not operating on under an FSES at all anymore. So we've made all of the issues go away. So, I mean, if anything comes up in the future, it's going to be an entirely new rabbit, so they would have to pull out of their house.
They always seem to find a way to do that. There, thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you,
Appreciate the
gentlemen.
information.
Yes, sir.
Bob, leave these fellows in on for the kiosk thing.
My understanding, they were on for tomorrow. I was prepared to speak with you tomorrow about that. I can give you the basics today if that's what you like.
It's gonna be on the workshop.
My understanding, yes, sir. 9 a.m. tomorrow morning.
All right. We
They, they were pulled the last time because they were put on a meeting and you wanted advance notice, so they were put on the last nursing home meeting. The nursing home meeting was canceled.
Cancel.
So I had it added to this agenda so that you had advance warning of the capital that's coming tomorrow.
I can, at your convenience, I can speak to the basics if you like. All my notes and everything are back on my desk.
guys okay with it?
You know, if he's on workshop for tomorrow, why don't we just keep him?
I can,
All right,
yeah,
that's fine.
I'm gonna be here at 9 o'clock. I think it's 9 o'clock tomorrow
All
morning.
right, you have another day of practice.
I was waiting for my television debut.
All right. We'll do it tomorrow. Thank you. All right.
Okay.
Is there any other business to be brought in front of the committee? Hearing none, is there a motion for adjournment?